Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Beth, and in today's video I'm finally going to be talking about these new Charlotte Tilbury palettes. So I have this one, which is super neutral, and then I also have this one called Sensual Sunset. In this video I will be following the format I've been following of late, where I do kind of up close top down swatches, and then I also do a demo of the eye look I am wearing today, and then I end by giving you my final thoughts and letting you know whether I think you should purchase any of these palettes. So I will have timestamps down below if you'd like to jump ahead to a particular portion, but on top of that format that I usually follow, I do have a kind of dedicated comparison between the Charlotte Tilbury Super Neutral palette, which is what I have on one of my eyes, and the Anastasia Sultry palette. So I have a video where I compared this palette to its larger sister, which was the inspiration for this palette. But immediately when I saw this palette, I did think of this palette right here. So that is why I really wanted to do a dedicated comparison on the eyes. Let me know down below, I might have given it away, which eye you think is which palette and which one you like better. So in the demo portion, I have one palette on one eye and one palette on the other. In all fairness, I did add an additional little sparkle of moon dust on one of my eyelids. So let me know down below if you can guess which is which. But yeah, I thought it was only fair to compare those two because in a similar video a few months ago now, I compared this palette from Charlotte Tilbury, which is the Beautyverse palette, to a similar 9-pan from Anastasia, the Sugar palette, which was from this past holiday season. So if you'd like to see these kind of pitted against one another, I'll have that video linked for you down below. But yeah, I do find it interesting that a lot of brands have been kind of releasing similar palettes in similar sizes, I guess I'll say. So given that prior comparison, I thought it was only fair that I compare these two right here. So like I said, I will have timestamps down below, but without further ado, let's jump into the swatches.
All right, so let's take a close look at these palettes. So I'm going to take them out of their outer packaging in a moment because the lights are reflecting off of them, but I just wanted to kind of show you the outer packaging here before I dig in. So this is the Super Neutral and this is the Sensual Sunset, and there is a slight color difference on the outer packaging. Obviously you have the window where you can see through, and it says here, Sensual Sunset Energy in a Palette, or Timeless Joyphoric Energy in a Palette. I don't know if joyphoric is a word. Made in Italy, and the problem with this packaging is it's very hard to read. 18-month shelf life, and these do contain talc. So let's dig in here. And I am getting over something, so I don't know if you can hear it in my voice or not, but I just thought I would mention that. So by far the most talked about part of this palette release was the packaging. So I wanted to kind of do a deep dive into that, and I think I did already take these out of their packaging. So if you see any fingerprints or whatever, that's just from me. So these were designed with makeup artists in mind. So that's why you have the clear cover, so that makeup artists on a job or whatever can quickly see through, and that one is not fully shut. There is a little plastic insert like so. And on the back, you just have the palette name and all of the different types of formulations. Again, 18-month, made in Italy. So they are clear plastic, little Charlotte Tilbury logo down here at the bottom. One thing that you'll note is that when you run your nail over this printing or whatever, it doesn't, you can't feel it. So it doesn't feel like something that is going to scratch off easily. And I just wanted to compare these as $60 9-pan palettes to what a lot of people brought up, which is the ColourPop 9-pan palettes. So these have kind of a similar outer packaging. I bought these from Target, and my understanding is that this kind of format has been at Target for a while now. I think they did launch some of their existing palettes with this packaging so that people shopping in store could very easily see what the palette was without having to open it, which makes a lot of sense. This one, you still have the shade names on the back, and these I just purchased recently. I did purchase 2 initially online, and one of the shades came broken, so I did end up having to return those, and I just picked these up in store. And these are made in the US, also contain talc. It's a pressed powder palette. I'm looking for a shelf life, but I can't find it. But in any event, I just wanted to kind of compare the packaging. So these retail for $14. You do get the same amount of product despite these being quite a bit larger. There is some kind of negative space here, and the shades are printed on the actual palette. But yeah, these contain 9 grams, as do the Charlotte Tilbury ones. So I think the Charlotte Tilbury ones are a tiny bit thicker for what it's worth. But yeah, like what I was saying about the printing on the Charlotte Tilbury, like these, I think if I took my spatula, for example, I can start to scrape off the lettering, if you can see that. And you can feel it when you run your finger over it. I'll also note they do feel less luxurious. I don't think anyone would really dispute that if they saw them in person. I'm not sure if these are magnetic. I tried to use my little tool here. I know some ColourPop palettes are magnetic. I think these might be glued in. But even when I was looking in store and like selecting a palette, a lot of the palettes seem to have pans that were not perfectly flush with their well, I guess. So I think the build on these is quite a bit better. You don't have the advantage of having, I guess, the shade name on the back, but they are numbered and you do have the formula. This one has the shade names, but it doesn't indicate the formulation. So these do feel more luxurious to me. And I picked up Deja Brew because I thought I would maybe just compare some similar shades. I don't think these are going to be dead on dupes. I also picked up Gone Metal. So I thought these two kind of, I guess, bridged this, what is this called? Super Neutral palette. There are a couple warmer palette options. So if you know you already like the ColourPop formula and you don't want to shell out for the Charlotte Tilbury, I don't think you'll have any issue finding a warm palette to go to. But if you did, I think there are some ColourPop ones. I think Warm Toasty might be one. So that is what they look like just in the pan here. And again, I did already open this myself. So I'm just gonna swatch some of the mattes. So very, very smooth feeling matte here. And then this is the Pick Me Up. It does feel pretty good, but it's not quite as silky smooth. I'll talk more about the formulas in a minute when I just swatch all of the palettes. But yeah, that was the Charlotte Tilbury and that was the ColourPop. So there is some indication of the formula. Of course, you never really know until you apply onto your eyelids. And then most of this palette is actually matte, which could be a good or a bad thing depending on your preference. So the middle shade is a Crystal Chrome, and then we have 2 Diamond Dimensions. I might as well swatch this one, which has that kind of wet effect. And this looks like, so you can see this is more of that kind of thick, kind of metallic. I don't know if ColourPop has really done any of those kind of celestial topper shades. This one is the Crystal Chrome, and this one is Crushed Out. So not very similar color-wise at all, really. Yeah, I would say ColourPop just doesn't have quite as sophisticated a formula. I don't know if they've made any huge improvements or changes to their to their pressed powder formula since they've been around. Let's try this one. And I can't, like, you can see there, like I can make a dent if I kind of really push in. So yeah, those are not that similar. ColourPop does like to do those kind of sequiny shades, which you'll also find in some Anastasia palettes. So I do have a ColourPop Super Shock, which is probably, you know, ColourPop's answer to some of these types of formulas. But this is in the shade Ritz, which is a lot of people's kind of go-to dupe for Space Cowboy. So yeah, you do get a little bit more of that kind of wet effect with that. So it's just kind of a question of whether you want everything in a palette or you want to reach for some Super Shocks. I think that's as far out as I can go. So just from initial impressions with the packaging and the formulations, I think the Charlotte Tilbury palettes certainly do not feel like ColourPop palettes. They definitely do feel more kind of luxurious and high-end. But let's kind of kick it up a notch. So going from this $14 price point, let's go to basically double that amount with the Anastasia mini palettes. So this is the mini Sultry. I do have a video comparing this to the full-size Sultry, which is what the inspiration for this was. So just comparing packaging, I like the Anastasia packaging a little bit more, to be honest. You do get 9 grams of product in this as well. So again, we're kind of comparing apples and apples here. So another cool toned color story. And again, these are 29. So I think what I'm going to be doing on the eyes is doing a look with this palette on one eye and this palette on the other so that we can kind of see how they perform. But color-wise, this is the palette that I immediately thought of when I saw this palette. This one also does have a magnetic closure and it does have a little mirror to it, which is nice. So you can't see through the palette. I've thought a little bit about how Charlotte Tilbury might have designed these if they hadn't gone with the clear cover. I guess they would have had to do different packaging for each palette. Like if they had like a green eye for the green palette, a blue eye for the blue palette, etc. I'm sure that would have driven up the cost. So that's worth mentioning. But yeah, there's pros and cons. Like this one they claim to be more artistry led, and this one is more kind of consumer friendly, if you will. So let's swatch. I guess I'll swatch this shade again and this one. Yeah, the Charlotte Tilbury one does feel a lot creamier again. Pretty similar in color though. I guess there's only so many ways you can do taupe. This one does have 3 metallics. This one has 4 metallics and 5 mattes. So that's worth considering. The tone of some of these is different. In general, I think that's not too far off actually. Yeah, in general, I think there's just a little bit more bulk to the ABH shadows, which I kind of associate with a more traditional formula, if you will, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So they're the black swatch, by the way. I do like that I have that matte cream in this palette. I think that'll be really useful. Some of these mattes look a little bit close to one another. This one, you can see a little bit more of a tone difference. Like this one's a little bit cooler, that one's a little bit warmer. Swatch the gray. Yeah, so I think even though she's not calling these like the cream to powder, that's a little bit of a cooler gray too. I think that's a little bit warmer. Even though she's not calling these like the cream to powder or future matte or whatever they were called in the previous palettes, I think this Silky matte formula does have a little bit more of that kind of cream-like texture to it. Again, I don't think any of these are going to be like super duper close. That one you can see has a lot more reflect, a lot more sparkly. That one is more just like a straight up metallic. So I think those are the shades that jump out to me as being most similar just at kind of first glance. But if you do have any specific swatch comparisons between these palettes or anything else, just let me know down below. And I'll just give you a close-up look at the texture as well. Okay, so going up from the $29 price point, we have the closest kind of product in terms of how it's marketed, and that is the Dior Backstage palette. This one is the Smoky Essentials. So these retail for, I want to say $52, so $8 less. And I know people really love these palettes. I haven't really gotten into this one yet. This palette does kind of go flat for what it's worth. This one I don't think does. And how much product do you get? This one, it does have the shades and the shade name. So you do get 10 grams of product as well. Only has a 6-month shelf life. So however you want to kind of figure that in. The thing about the Dior formula, and I'm saying this now without having applied any of these to my lids, is that it tends to be a little bit more like on the subtle side. I think this is a satin, so it's not going to be kind of identical. So I don't know, you just tend to get like softer looks in it. You're not going to get like the most sparkly shade in this palette, I think, is that kind of gunmetal. So let's swatch that. So you're just not getting the kind of dimension, really. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just saying in terms of like how expensive a shadow might be to formulate, these kinds of pigments and everything do tend to be more expensive. And I'm not even sure if these are pressed or if they're manufactured on a, I think it's called a Good Day, that little kind of plastic thing that you find sometimes. So without taking this apart, I have no way of knowing. So yeah, I don't think the Dior palettes are necessarily more luxurious feeling than the Charlotte Tilbury, really. I mean, people were making a big deal out of it being kind of slightly rounded, which, okay, fine. I don't know. I think the reaction to these was a little bit overblown just based on maybe pictures online, which don't tell the full story. And I guess to prove the point, so I pulled out some of the 4-pan palettes that I have. I don't think either of these is currently available, but these retail for $55, similar ones. I don't recall how much they were when they first came out, if the price has increased at all, but I don't really remember anyone making a huge fuss over the price of the quad specifically. When these came out, they still do have the clasp closure, which, there you go. Yeah, I don't remember anyone having a big reaction to that. It might be because the original palettes came out along with a lot of other products. There was a lot to kind of take in, and it was, I guess, how Charlotte Tilbury was positioning herself in the market at the time. The thing that stands out to me, so I'm going to compare it to the Sunset palette because it has similar shades. So these did have a mirror, obviously, and there's a little bit more kind of empty space, but it just has kind of similar information on the back. So hopefully you'll be able to see if I put these up close. Like, just looking at them in the pan, the sparkles in this one, the new one, just seem to have a little bit more kind of impact. So, like I said, I think we just have more kind of traditional metallics. I don't know. Let me know if you think those basically look like the same formula or not. That was a crystal chrome. Let's try a molten satin, which I think is kind of more of a traditional metallic. And then we have these two down at the bottom. So those are where you're getting your real kind of bang for your buck, I think. The Diamond Dimension and the Crystal Pop. Yeah, so for $5 more, like you're basically losing a mirror. You're getting 5 more shadows. And you have some of these quote unquote special shades. And those are like kind of the older formula there. So this one was a copper charge. This one is the luxury palette of pops. So these are supposed to be more pop shades. And yeah, it still seems like there may be kind of a generation behind. Try and get all of these in frame. So yeah, so we have those. They do claim that these new 60 pan palettes are limited edition, which I don't fully understand because it seems like if they're supposed to be kind of workhorse products for like a makeup artist, those are the types of products that tend to kind of stick around and not be limited edition. Also, like when you want some core eyeshadows in your lineup. All right, so moving on to some of those limited edition Charlotte Tilbury palettes. So I have the holiday palettes from the last couple of years here. And in addition to these two, I did consider buying the purpley one and possibly the pink one in part so I could compare it to these palettes, but I opted to not do that, and maybe when it comes time for the Sephora sale or whatever, then I will, but in any event. So these are the two palettes. So the one from this year was $69, so $9 more expensive. I do think this packaging seemed like a bit of a downgrade compared to this packaging from the year before, and this was $75 full price. So you're still getting 9 shadows, you're still getting 9 grams worth of product, you're just getting a fancy cover and a mirror. And like I said, I'm not in love with a clasp over a magnet. This one does had the shades printed on this as well, but it also has the shades on the back, which I appreciate. So yeah, so these are the same amount of product. You can kind of go either way, like having a mirror like this size is good for travel, but then if you have a mirror in a different compact, like this is obviously more compact. Yeah, so I wasn't totally in love with this. And when they're only releasing one at a time, you know, maybe they can put a little bit more money into the packaging versus trying to come out with 6 at once. I think that would make things a lot more expensive and probably raise the price of the palettes overall. So brands that do like a blush launch or whatever, a brand new brand or more of an indie brand doesn't necessarily have a different colored component for each different shade. Just trying to think what might be the best kind of swatch comparisons here. Like I said, I don't think any of the shades are really going to be too similar. But this one had those future mattes, like I mentioned. And then they also had what they're calling Crystal Glow and a Party Topper. At least in theory, none of these formulas overlap at all. Maybe, okay, so I'll just compare this future matte and maybe this one. So this one you can see a little bit more on my finger. It's like wet looking versus this one. So not quite the same. Still a little bit smoother than than some of those other formulations, but you can see that is definitely more of a powder than a cream compared to those other ones. All right, so let's watch the Party Topper and the Crystal Glow. And I think these palettes might both still be available if you were interested. This one, the one in the middle, is the Crystal Chrome. And this one, I think, is the Crystal Glow. So, yeah, I don't think those are really meant to be the same. That one's more metallic. That one has a little bit more kind of surface sparkle to it. Let me get to focus. But let's compare some of these. So yeah, I don't think the new palettes have a lower quality formula. I think it's just different, and you are paying less as well. So there's that to consider. So that was the $69 palette. This one, $75. Again, you have Crystal Glow, Party Topper, and Future Matte. So same formulations in both of these. It'll be interesting to see what she releases for the holiday season. I'll just swatch these two. So that is the new palette. Has the Party Topper, Crystal Glow, Future Matte. So I hope that's helpful. I did also just want to mention, in case anyone was curious, the NARS Afterglow Tempting palette that I featured not too long ago. This one retails for $49, I believe, and you do get more products. You get 9 times 1.7 grams. So each of these shadows has 0.7 more grams than the Charlotte Tilbury. It does have a mirror. So that's what they look like side by side. I talk a lot about this palette and whether I think it's worth your money in that video, so I don't want to repeat myself, but yeah, we'll see how this looks on the eyes. I'm not even getting all my swatches off here. Yeah, we'll see how it looks on the eyes. I will just quickly say, because I do have, I think, a reel or short on it. If you're interested in the kind of sparkly shades, the glittery ones in this palette, I would just encourage you to think twice if you have any of the Urban Decay Moon Dust, because there are quite a few similarities. So you might be able to kind of satisfy your desire for that palette. So there is the NARS, and just quickly from a kind of color comparison, as far as palettes that I haven't already compared, this is the MAC Encrypted Kryptonite. So this is only a 6-pan palette, but I just wanted to kind of put them next to each other. I don't think they're dupes or anything. I just kind of pulled out some similar cool tone palettes that I have. And then finally, as far as cool tone palettes, I wanted to look at the Lisa Eldridge Vega palette, which is one of my favorites. Again, you're only getting 6 shades in this one, and this one retails for $62 US. I think, you know, more design or whatever went into the packaging. I have had a few little, what do you call them? Defects, I guess, as I've traveled with this palette, because I think it's aluminum, so it's a little bit prone to that kind of thing. But the interesting thing about this palette, I don't know if her brand is really focused on makeup artistry, but it is founded by a working makeup artist, so I think that informs a lot of her decision making. What she did with this palette is that it is magnetic. So you do have the mirror. I think this is meant to look like a kind of retro cigarette case. But yeah, she does have removable pans that you can, oh Jesus, I just really dug into that one, didn't I? Okay. Don't do what I did. Good thing black is not a color I really care that much about or use that often really. But yeah, don't do what I did. But anyway, in addition to these being removable, you can purchase refills separately. Sometimes there's an issue with them being out of stock, but all that being said, the better way to depot these, you want to be careful, obviously, but they do have holes on the back. I was just being lazy. So you just can very carefully tilt it out. And I do somewhere have, I think, my refills. But anyway, for the ones I bought separately, I like write on the back or whatever. But anyway, yeah, these do have that kind of more, I think she calls them a seamless matte, but like a cream to powder formula. So just to compare for you, I guess I'll compare the two. And I've had this palette for a while now, pretty much I think since it first launched, so I might be due for a replacement anyway. The shelf life on these, is it 24 months? Probably had it longer than that at this point. So yeah, all that to say, if you do like the kind of future matte formula from the Charlotte Tilbury palettes, the holiday palettes, I would encourage you to look at least at Eldridge. She does have, what does she call them? Luminous and metallic shades that I think do have a lot of sparkle. So I think that is the metallic and that is the luminous. So I don't know, it's just really pretty, especially when you layer it together. So I do really like that palette. Would encourage you to look at it if you haven't already. But yeah, that is $2 more expensive. So again, just kind of comparing prices here. Let me also just talk about Natasha's Silky Matte formula. So this is a newer formulation that she has released, and because Charlotte Tilbury has called hers matte silks, I guess, I did want to compare it to a similar sounding. I'd say the Charlotte Tilbury feels even a little bit silkier. That's how they look swatched. Yeah, the shade's obviously different, but anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting new thing that has been coming out in these eyeshadow palettes. So let me wash my arm once again, and then I'll just do the dedicated swatches of these two palettes. All right, so let's start with the swatches. Okay, so I'm getting the shade descriptions from the Sephora website because they weren't on the Charlotte Tilbury website. So first up we have White Pearl, which is a diamond dimension. Neutral Bone, which is a matte silk. And Cool Taupe, which is a matte silk. Those are the first three. Okay, so next, number 4, Cool Gray Brown is a matte silk. Molten Brown is a crystal chrome. And Graphite Gray is a matte silk. Yeah, I'm not sure we needed both of those. One of them probably could have gone a little bit warmer, to be honest, and would have given it a little bit more versatility, I think. Okay, so lastly we have Slate Gray is a matte silk, Mocha Brown is a matte silk, and Cool Tan Nude is a diamond dimension. Yeah, swatch-wise, I have no complaints. All right, time for Sensual Sunset. So we have the shades Bisque, which is a matte silk, Warm Gold, which is a crystal chrome, Apricot Tan is a matte silk. That one didn't feel quite as silky as some of the others. And keep in mind, I've washed my arm with dish soap about 5 times already, so things might be a little bit drier than they were when we started. Going into Chocolate Brown, which is a matte silk. Copper Bronze is a molten satin. And Brick is a matte silk. And then last one here, we have Iridescent Light Gold is a diamond dimension. Burgundy Wine is a matte silk. And Copper Sparkle is a crystal pop. So I think if she offered a palette of just these diamond and crystal shades, I'd be all over it. That one doesn't look the best, but I think that last one kind of made up for it. All right, so that is gonna do it for these swatches here. So let's head into the demo, I guess.
All right, so let's get into the demo. So I think just to make sure that things are as similar as possible as I go along, I'm going to do both eyes kind of back and forth instead of doing one eye all the way and then doing the other. So I think what I want to start off with, if I can recall from my swatches, those two look pretty similar. So I think I will do the Charlotte Tilbury on my right eye and then the Anastasia on my left, I think is what I'll do. And I will use the same brush for both sides, but I do have my little Sigma switch here. So hopefully I can avoid any kind of cross-contamination or whatever. And as we know, unfortunately, the Charlotte Tilbury doesn't have a mirror. So to the extent that gets confusing, I'll hold up this little mirror. So I'm just going to take that taupe shade and work that into the crease. I already did my base, as you can tell, and I did my eye primer and I set it as well. The Charlotte Tilbury does have a kind of matte bone color that I would typically apply all over the lid before I went in with any other shades. But because the Anastasia doesn't have that, I'm just going to kind of forego that step. So going into the Anastasia with the same Sonia G Classic crease. So that is how we are looking so far. And again, I am cleaning off my brush in between. This wasn't a perfectly clean brush, so to the extent you see any sparkles or anything, it's probably from when I last used this brush. So that is where we are after the first shadow. And then next, I think I want to try the darker brown. So there's one slightly warmer shade in the Charlotte Tilbury and one slightly cooler toned. The Anastasia looks like it's a little bit of a deeper brown. So I'll probably put those two against one another. They seem to be the most similar. All right, so taking my mini booster and going into this shade down here in the bottom row and applying that to the outer corner, and I'll blend that out in a moment. And then cleaning off my brush and going in with this shade in the Anastasia. So I'm trying to do the same shape and the same placement on both sides. And if I really wanted to deepen it up, both palettes do have a black shade, but I just don't think that's really necessary on my skin tone. So taking my classic crease without any additional product and just blending that out. Again, I know you can see some sparkles. And then doing the same on the other side. I did just kind of wipe this on my Sigma switch. I might add just a tad bit more on this side just to make them slightly more even. And then underneath, I do want to go in, I think with that first kind of taupe shade that we used. So in this palette, it is this one in the top corner. So I did set my under eyes as well, but it always helps to have a little bit more insurance there. And then going in with this shade in the Anastasia. Same position in the palette. And again, the Charlotte Tilbury does have that matte shade that I would use to kind of soften that a bit, but just to keep things a little bit more even, I'm going to use my Charlotte Tilbury powder. This is what I used for all my setting and everything. It's kind of my go-to powder, really. Alrighty, and then to add the metallic element, I know there was one shade that was super close. So as we discussed, the Charlotte Tilbury only has 3 metallic shades, really. So those are the 3 metallics. Really beautiful though. So one is more that traditional kind of metallic shade and 2 are a little bit more sparkly. And then on the Anastasia side, that's what those look like. So these are more all metallic. So that's what they look like side by side. I think I want to go in with this shade. It's maybe a tad lighter, but that one almost leans a little bit green. All right, so I'm going to take a Rephr 28 and go into that middle shade in the Charlotte Tilbury and just start placing that. There's definitely some fallout, as you can see. This is a dry brush. Again, cleaning that brush off. I'm going to go in with that slightly more sparkly shade in the corner and apply that kind of in the inner third. And then blend over. So really pretty effect. In fact, I think I could just as well apply that over the entire lid. I think it's really pretty. So I'll take my little powder brush here and just knock away any of that fallout. I might come back for that kind of whiter shade, but I first want to, I guess, start off with that top, with that shade right there, and same Rephr 28. So I think color-wise, this one is a little bit closer to the combination of those 2 shades. And again, you have a little bit more of that kind of traditional satin or metallic formula. I think to kind of give us a little bit more of a similar effect, I'm going to take the silver in the middle here and see what happens if I layer that over this shade right here. So yeah, so I think Shade-wise, that's a little bit closer, but you're not getting that kind of dimension that you are on the Charlotte Tilbury side. I'm going to take this Refer 23 brush again. I have another pencil brush I think would probably be better, but again, I just don't feel like reaching for it. So going into this Charlotte Tilbury kind of sparkly shade and just adding a little bit more of an inner kind of corner highlight. And again, cleaning that brush off, and then the kind of, I guess, comparison shade from the Anastasia is not quite as stark white. Yeah, I guess it depends whether you want a more like traditional satin finish or if you want more of that kind of glitter dimensional finish. All right, so I think I'm gonna leave it there. Like I said, I could probably deepen it up even more if I wanted to by adding some black, but otherwise I think that's a pretty good representation of both palettes. So I'm going to hop off camera, do my liner and mascara, and I'll be back to give you my final thoughts. All right, so liner and mascara is on. I used the Bobbi Brown liner, long wear cream liner stick, which I've really been enjoying. This will be in the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, if you haven't already checked that out, so don't sleep on that. I also used the Tarte Lights Camera Splashes, which will also be in the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, so my holy grail mascara, and the Clinique Bottom Lash Mascara on my bottom lashes. So anyway, to conclude this video, if I had to choose just one of these, and keep in mind I've already paid for both of these, so it's kind of sunk costs at this point, but if I could only keep one of these, I would probably keep the Charlotte Tilbury. I think it's a little bit more modern, a little bit more interesting in its finish. So although it is kind of twice the cost, I do prefer it. If you are on a budget, however, and you maybe want to pick up a palette at like half the cost of the Charlotte Tilbury, I did want to see what would happen if I applied like an Urban Decay Moondust shadow on top of the Anastasia palette. So this is the shade Cosmic, which is kind of the white shade here. And there are some good dupes of the Moondust shadows. It still doesn't give quite the effect, but if you did want to, I guess, kind of make do, and maybe you already have some of the Urban Decay Moondust, or you have some of the shadows from Moira that are really similar, or even ColourPop, you can add a little bit more dimension on top of the Anastasia palette without shelling out for one of these. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to purchase high-end makeup to get a beautiful eye makeup look, but just comparing these two specific products, I would say that, to me at least, the Charlotte Tilbury is a little bit more interesting and attractive than the Anastasia. You might have a different preference. You might prefer the more kind of subtle, more traditional kind of satin metallic look of the Anastasia shadows, but I think Charlotte Tilbury did give us something a little bit special to justify the price point. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you all. Unfortunately, I didn't get it up in time for Charlotte Tilbury was having a 20% off sale over the kind of Oscars weekend. I believe she does that every year, but if you don't want to risk these palettes, I guess, going out of stock before next year, or you just don't want to wait, the Sephora Spring Savings event is just around the corner. So if you are a Rouge member, you can get the 20% off. Hopefully at least you can get 15 or 10% off if you're really pining for it. It is also at Ulta, and Ulta often has kind of various discounts and deals, points multipliers, that kind of thing that pop up throughout the year. So maybe just put it on your wish list and wait until the right deal comes along for you. But yeah, I think it's a really pretty palette. So let me know if you've tried any of these and what you think. I am still thinking about the pink and purple palettes, but honestly, I don't probably need them. So who knows if they will make their way into my collection or not. But anyway, like I said, I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, I hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.